A gentle wind blew over the lake as Michael stood on the small wooden dock. He looked at the calm water, its surface reflecting the soft light of the early morning sun. Michael had arrived in Maplewood only yesterday. He had left the city behind, trading its noise and crowded streets for this quiet town by the water. He wore a simple shirt, old jeans, and rubber boots that squeaked on the wooden boards. In his hand, he held a single key. It opened the door to the guest house he had inherited from his late aunt. The building stood just a short walk from the dock, on a narrow dirt road lined with maple trees. Their leaves were bright red and orange in autumn, but today they were still green. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. It smelled of pine and fresh water and something gentle, like a promise. Michael remembered how his aunt had been a kind woman with silver hair and a warm smile. She loved this place and had told him many stories when he was a child. She always said that the lake had a way of healing broken hearts and tired minds. But Michael did not believe her then. He was too busy with his work, too busy with bills, too busy with city life. Now he was here, standing on the dock, and he felt the truth of her words. He felt a small calm settle in his chest. He stepped off the dock and walked toward the guest house. The building was 2 stories tall, painted a soft cream color with blue shutters. A small wrap-around porch ran along the front, and a wooden bench sat under a large window. Potted flowers, bright reds, pinks, and yellows, lined the steps. It looked out of place next to the tall pines, but somehow it felt right. Michael unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish. The floorboards creaked under his weight. A small hallway led to a cozy living room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A stack of firewood sat beside it. On a wooden table, a note was pinned to a small glass vase filled with fresh flowers. The note read, "Welcome to your new beginning, dear Michael. Love, Aunt Clara." Michael smiled at the familiar handwriting. He picked up the vase and walked through the living room into the kitchen. It was simple, wooden cabinets, a small dining table, and a window that looked out at the dock. A pot of coffee sat on the stove, ready and warm. It looked and smelled inviting. Michael poured a cup, sat at the table, and sipped. The warmth spread through him, and he felt at home for the first time in years. He spent the rest of the morning walking through the guest house. There were 4 rooms for guests on the second floor, each with a small window and a view of the lake or the trees. The bed linens were clean and neatly folded. A stack of old books and a basket of towels sat on each bed. In one room, he found a pair of his aunt's slippers under the bed. He picked them up and remembered how she had said, "People need to feel welcome as soon as they step inside." He placed the slippers by the bed. In another room, he found a small wooden box. It was locked. Curious, he carried it downstairs to the kitchen. He opened the box and found a key and a photograph. The photograph showed Aunt Clara standing on the same dock where Michael stood that morning. She held a young girl's hand. Behind them, the guest house looked brand new, with the same blue shutters. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was the name Sarah. Michael felt a mix of sadness and hope. He returned the box and key to its place and decided to ask the neighbors about the girl Sarah. By midday, he walked to the small grocery store at the edge of town. It was run by Mrs. Thompson, a plump woman with a round face and gentle eyes. She recognized Michael at once. "You must be Michael," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your aunt spoke of you often. How nice to finally meet you." Michael thanked her and asked about the photo he found. Mrs. Thompson nodded. Sarah was Aunt Clara's granddaughter. She and her mother moved away to the city many years ago. They visited sometimes, but then life happened. I think Sarah grew up. Now she may have a family of her own. Michael asked if she knew where Sarah lived. Mrs. Thompson shook her head. Not sure, but there is a woman named Jo at the post office. She handles most of the town's mail. She might know where Sarah is. If anyone does, it is her. Michael bought some bread, milk, and eggs and thanked Mrs. Thompson. He walked back to the guest house, thinking about finding Sarah. That afternoon, Michael walked to the small building by the town square where the post office was located. He stepped inside and felt the familiar smell of paper and stamps. An elderly woman with silver hair and bright eyes greeted him. "Hello, dear. What can I do for you?" she asked. Michael introduced himself and showed her the photograph. "I'm looking for Sarah," he said. "Do you know her?" The woman studied the photo. "Yes, I do. She was here long ago. But she moved away when she was a teenager. I think she lives in Maplewood now, one town over. I believe she has a child, but I'm not certain. Let me check my records." She tapped on a small keyboard, then printed a piece of paper. She handed it to him. "This is her address. I hope you find her." Michael thanked her and walked back to the guest house, his heart beating fast. He felt a strange hope. Maybe Sarah would want to see the old place where her grandmother lived. Evening came quickly. Michael lit a fire in the fireplace, poured himself another cup of coffee, and sat by the window, watching the sun set over the lake. The sky turned pink and purple, and a few stars appeared. He opened the notebook he found in the kitchen. Aunt Clara had written many things in it: recipes for soup and bread, notes about guests, and some personal thoughts. On one page she had written, "A warm heart can make a stranger feel like family." Michael closed the book and looked at the photograph again. He decided he would wait until the next morning to visit Sarah. For now, he wanted to rest and enjoy the peace of Mapletown. He woke up early the next day. The sun was just rising, and a thin mist hovered over the lake. He fed Milo, his cat, and made some coffee. He packed a small bag with a fresh loaf of bread, a thermos of tea, and the photograph. He drove his old truck to the neighboring town of Maplewood. Sarah's address led him to a small house with a blue door and a garden of wildflowers. He parked by the roadside and walked up to the door. He knocked gently. A woman in her late 20s opened the door. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes. A small boy, about 5 years old, stood behind her, clutching a toy car. The woman looked surprised. "Yes?" she asked. Michael smiled. "Hello. My name is Michael Green. I think you might be Sarah Johnson." The woman looked at the photograph he held. She nodded slowly. "I am. And you are my grandfather's nephew?" Tears filled her eyes. She hugged him without a word. Michael hugged her back. Then he looked at the boy. "You must be Jacob?" The boy nodded, his eyes wide. "I'm his grandfather," Michael said. "You can call me Grandpa." They invited Michael inside. The house was small but cozy. A kettle sat on the stove. Photographs of the boy and his mother were on the walls. They sat at a round wooden table. Sarah poured tea for them. "I didn't know Grandma Clara had family left here," she said quietly. Michael smiled. She always spoke fondly of this place. He handed Sarah the loaf of bread. "I made this for you." She took the bread with a gentle smile. The boy, Jacob, watched Michael closely. After a moment, he reached out and took the photograph. "Is this like me?" he asked, showing the boy's face in the photo. Michael explained that the photograph was of Aunt Clara and Sarah at the guest house many years ago. "You look a lot like her," he said, pointing. Jacob studied the photo. "Do you live at that house?" he asked. Michael nodded. "Yes, I do." Jacob smiled and took a small bite of bread. "Can I see it?" he asked. Michael laughed. "Of course, buddy." They spent the rest of the morning talking and sharing stories. Sarah told Michael about her life, school, college, and how she became a teacher. She told him about Jacob's birth and how he filled her life with joy. Michael told her about his work in the city, how he missed Aunt Clara, and how he decided to move here. Sarah listened and nodded. At noon, they drove back together to the guest house. Jacob sat in the back seat, looking excited. When they arrived, Jacob ran down the path toward the lake, his arms outstretched. He stopped at the dock, looking at the water. Michael smiled and lifted Jacob onto his shoulders. They walked to the guest house porch. Sarah looked around, seeing the place as her grandmother had described it in stories. She ran her fingers along the old wooden rail. "It's just like I remember," she whispered. Michael went inside to make lunch. He stirred a pot of soup and heated bread in the oven. The smell of tomato and basil filled the kitchen. Sarah and Jacob set the table. They ate lunch together: warm soup, fresh bread, and bright orange slices. Jacob asked many questions. "Grandpa, do you sleep here?" "Yes." "Grandma slept here too?" "Yes." "Can we play in the garden?" "Yes." After lunch, they walked to the backyard. There was a small garden with tomatoes and herbs. A tall maple tree stood at the corner. Jacob ran around, picking up fallen leaves. Sarah sat on the wooden bench and breathed deeply. She closed her eyes and smiled. That evening, they sat by the campfire near the lake. Michael had built a small fire, and they lit marshmallows on sticks. The stars shone bright, and the sound of water lapping against the dock was calming. Jacob fell asleep on Sarah's lap. Sarah laid him gently on a blanket. Michael and Sarah sat close by, wrapped in blankets. They talked about Aunt Clara and how proud she would be to have her family together again. Sarah said, "I want to open a little art class here. I love teaching. Maybe I can teach the children in the town." Michael nodded. "That sounds perfect." They sat quietly, watching the fire fade and thinking about the days ahead. Over the next weeks, life in Mapletown began to change. Michael cleaned more rooms in the guest house, painting walls and repairing chairs. He built a small wooden sign that read, "Mapletown Guest House," and hung it above the front door. He fixed the fence around the garden and planted sunflowers next to the porch. Sarah painted her old bedroom light blue and hung her watercolor paintings on the walls. She started the art class in the town hall. Children came every Saturday. With parents, they brought paints, paper, and brushes. They laughed and painted landscapes, animals, and flowers. Sarah taught them simple shapes and bright colors. The town children felt proud to learn art. Michael sometimes brought fresh soup or cookies to the class. Jacob spent his days exploring. He rode his small bicycle up and down the dirt road. He fished with Michael at the dock. He fed the ducks by the water's edge. He played hide-and-seek in the trees with other children. The town felt safe and kind. Neighbors greeted them with waves and smiles. Mrs. Thompson at the grocery store always offered fresh apples. Mr. Clark at the gas station always gave a friendly nod. The cafe owner, Mary, would give Jacob a free cookie when he came inside. Mapletown was a place where people cared for each other. In late autumn, the leaves turned bright red, orange, and yellow. The maple tree in the backyard looked like it was on fire. Michael built a fire pit in the yard and invited neighbors for a small party. They roasted marshmallows and shared hot cider. Sarah and Michael told stories of Aunt Clara and how she loved autumn. Children danced around the fire, their laughter echoing through the trees. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly. It was a night of warmth in the cool air. Winter came next. Snow covered the ground, and the lake froze over. Michael shoveled the walkway to the guest house every morning. He lit a fire in the fireplace and placed logs on the woodpile every afternoon. The guest room stayed warm with thick blankets and soft pillows. Sarah made soup and chili. She baked bread and cookies. Jacob made snow angels and built a small snowman by the porch. The town held a small winter festival in December. There was a singing circle, hot cocoa stalls, and a small ice skating rink on the frozen lake. Michael and Sarah helped with the festivities, and Jacob skated with his new friends. The guest house was full, too, as travelers came to see the town's winter beauty. By spring, the snow melted. The garden came back to life with green leaves and small buds on the trees. Michael planted new herbs in the garden beds: basil, thyme, and rosemary. He built a small greenhouse next to the fence. Sarah and Jacob helped him. Jacob held the watering can while Sarah planted seeds. They smiled at the sight of fresh green shoots. Neighbors stopped by to help. Mr. Thompson brought fresh seeds. Mrs. Clark brought coffee and donuts. The small shelter brought the town together. Summer arrived soon after. The days grew long and warm. The lake was a deep blue, inviting everyone to swim. Michael and Sarah bought a small rowboat. They paddled together on calm mornings. Molly the cat, Michael's cat, napped in the sun on the dock. Jacob learned to swim in the shallow part of the lake. He held Michael's hand until he felt brave enough to swim alone. The guest house was busy in summer. Visitors from the city came for long weekends. They fished, read books by the lake, and walked in the woods. They left happy notes in a small journal on the front desk. "Thank you for your kindness. The best vacation I've had. We will return soon." Michael and Sarah read the notes and smiled. Their hard work was helping others find peace and joy. One autumn afternoon, Michael found a letter in the small wooden box on the kitchen table. It was yellow and old, just like the one Aunt Clara left behind. It read, "If you find this letter, know that this place is special. To be happy, share kindness. Your story will continue. Love, M." Michael showed the letter to Sarah and Jacob. Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. "It's the same letter," she said, "just like the one you found years ago." Jacob held the paper carefully. "What should I do?" he asked. Michael smiled. "I think you should put it in a book that the next traveler will find." Jacob nodded. He chose a thick, leather-bound journal from the shelf. He wrote a small note at the beginning: "To the next adventurer, welcome to Mapletown. You will find peace here." Then he placed Aunt Clara's letter inside. Michael, Sarah, and Jacob put the journal on a small table near the door. A sign read, "Find magic, leave magic." Years passed. Michael and Sarah grew older. Jacob went to college in a nearby city, but he returned every summer with stories of his life and new friends. He taught art at Mapletown School each winter. Michael and Sarah continued to run the guest house with warmth and pride. The old letters and the journal still sat by the door. Travelers found them and added their own notes. "This place healed my heart. I found friends here. Mapletown is home." The journal grew thick with stories from around the world. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun set over the red and orange leaves, Michael and Sarah sat on the porch with cups of hot cider. They watched the lake shimmer in the fading light. Sarah reached for Michael's hand. "We did it," she said softly. Michael nodded. "We did. Aunt Clara's magic lives on." Behind them, the guest house glowed softly with warm lights. Farther down the dirt road, warm lights shined in other windows at homes that had once been dark. The town was full of life and hope. And that was the greatest gift of all.